Hi, this is Paula, Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. And today we're going to go into topics more deeply with Joe Barton and Burt Aldrich, who is a medical marijuana activist. If you're having trouble calling in to Paula, Gloria, tell me what your problem is. What I'm suspecting that your problem is that you can't hear me other than the television. You can't hear me only on the telephone. That's what I'm suspecting the problem is. But engineering says that this is impossible. It's not happening on any other shows. But if that's what's happening to you, email me at rabbitholecentral@earthlink.net, and also email Dan Coughlin, who's the executive director here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And that's where we're coming to you from. These are the fabulous studios at 537 West 59th. Also, when you call in and you mention 10 different topics, it's just like too much to handle in one call. I'm excited that you have 10 different compelling topics. What I want you to do is come down to 537 West 59th, join me on camera, and let's go through these 10 compelling, fantastically interesting topics that have to do with marijuana prohibition. Come in person and we'll go through it more carefully. So again, if you're having trouble hearing me, that's what I want. I want you to call in to come. Yeah, I'll see now. I see the red going up. So keep putting that in. Dan at mnn.org, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, or rabbitholecentral@earthlink.net. So what I want to do now is go over some of the topics that were brought up when Burt was with me live. And then also the show that Joe Friendly did, anything that might be missing, and then see if we can also get some input from Joe Barton. Well, let me start off with Burt with what most interests me. Everyone says, oh, the poor guy, he's in a wheelchair. Everybody feels sorry for him. He can get anything he wants. That's kind of the feeling. They feel that medical marijuana people are going to get their medicine, but people who want it for recreation, which could also be beneficial to be kind of like preventative for problems in the future, they feel that they're not being listened to as much. So nevertheless, it seems as though when you got busted, you were busted with this supreme, horrible violation of selling to a minor. Now, first there's two things. The person's a minor, and the second thing is selling. Why can't we sell something that's benign? And as a paraplegic now, we can go over what your income used to be in the past. You're on disability.
Right.
So
yeah, why was I forced to sell in the first place? I mean, that's, you know, you can say, well, I shouldn't have sold to a minor, but I shouldn't have been having to sell in order to get my medicine.
And that's what you needed.
And that's what I needed. I had found something that I realized that I needed to better my life and improve my quality of life, and it was less dangerous than the other options that I had, but the only way that I could afford it was to
pay for it yourself
and get some for some other people at the same time.
Right,
and so,
right. I understand. So when you say less dangerous for you, the only thing it wasn't dangerous, that it was dangerous to, is your pocketbook, right? Because the pharmaceuticals were all paid for.
Right.
So insurance covered that. But insurance isn't covering what works for you the best.
Right.
And I think that's why they want to regulate it. But my experience with Christian Lorette in Canada, who produced Run from the Cure, I had the great opportunity to talk with him, and one of the first fully licensed medical marijuana patient in Canada, he contacted me, and then I arranged a call. I wanted to get him with Rick Simpson. Basically what he's saying is he gets garbage from the government. It's like they take a big plant and put it through a mulcher and give him sticks and things. It's almost, you can't even smoke it. It doesn't light, it doesn't burn. So there you are, you're fully qualified, you've got your license, you're so happy, you think you're not going to be under pressure, and then you have these restrictions. You can't collect the trichomes, that's what making the oil is called, and you have the quality that you still have to go out on the street and get it illegally. So what do you think the way around it is?
Well, it needs to be totally legalized. I mean, we need to lift the prohibition off of marijuana, number one. And then number two, people need to be more vocal in how it's helping them and
Right.
encouraging the use of it.
Right. So now, Joe, since you've been successful in arguing your case to a judge, how do you think we should solve this problem? Because I can see why they want to regulate, because it would be just too cruel to allow so many people like Burt not to have it, and yet they don't want to let go of the monopoly and let just anybody grow and sell it.
Well, I'm for repeal of the marijuana laws. The laws should have never been made in the first place. They're unconstitutional. For thousands of years, man has grown his own herbs or used whatever herbs he needed for healing, and nobody ever stopped it. It wasn't until 1937 that they made this law that violates everybody's rights. I'm not for legalization. I'm for repeal of the bad law. Take that law away and let the people grow or do what they want with the marijuana. You know?
Now,
it would be available to everyone.
Now, how can people do that as regular citizens, as people in wheelchairs, as people like us, as judges, as people who could potentially be on a jury? Can all of them do courageous things?
Well, if people are on a jury, you're allowed to vote your conscience. The judge is going to say you have to vote the law, but that's actually not true. You can vote your conscience. If you're on a jury and you believe that the law is harsh or unfair, you can say, I refuse to put this person in jail. And if you stand your ground, they can't put a person in jail. Juries can stop it. The second thing people can do is write to the congressman, write to their senators, write to the governor, and tell them that we want repeal of this bad law, of this unjust law. And the next thing that people should be doing right now is saying to the Congress and the Senate and to the governors, we want to free all marijuana prisoners, you know, whether they were selling marijuana or not. It should be... the New York State Legislature said themselves in their own paperwork, marijuana is not harmful. And if it's not harmful, why are we still putting people in jail in New York? Why are our jails full of nonviolent marijuana offenders? It's time for the people to take control and start telling the politicians. We the people rule in America if we the people speak up. If we the people don't speak up, then the politicians rule us. It's time for people to start telling the politicians what we want.
Burt, do you think it's possible that judges can act politically, or they're just impartial? If they're just impartial and they're just looking at the law, the reason we rushed up, I definitely wanted to support you when you went to the Kingston courthouse, and to go up there and to support you sight unseen. I'd never known you before. Yeah, there you are coming in in the wheelchair and you're discussing the case. We actually thought we'd be going up there to raise bail for you, that because of this violation, by the letter of the law, you could be put in jail. Now, the county didn't have the facilities for you, which meant that the judge would have had to put you in the state prison, which is a grisly place to be.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen for you. Can you describe what happened, and were you scared? I was scared.
In sitting and listening to the judge make decisions, I was very concerned because
he's a tough judge.
He was a very tough judge, and he, very much hanging judge. He would not. Pleas that were already made that would come before him, he'd say, "Well, I don't think that the victims would." Go along
you
with this.
heard
And
that
so
case too?
He would, make it harder,
right.
Make it tougher. So I was very concerned in going to see him.
Oh, excuse me.
The interesting thing is I never did get to see him. He had a private conference with my lawyer,
right,
and excluded me from the room.
Right. Now, was that the case I heard where the plea was not honored because he said, I don't think the victims will be happy with this?
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, isn't that what a judge and due process is all about, that you don't just let the victims say, I want blood? And how are you really going to rehabilitate anybody in prison anyway? But regardless of that, that's what he said, implying that the defense attorney should have okayed this with the victims first. But that's not in the law. So the way he was, if you heard the same case I heard, that's the way he was phrasing it, saying, I don't think the victims will be happy about this, as if he's supporting the victims.
Right. And that's not his place.
Was that the case you heard?
Yeah.
It was. Were you pretty shocked?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you were in the waiting room.
And then in my situation, he gave me 3 months to come up with some type of program that would allow medical marijuana, which it's going to be interesting to find. Which
seemed compassionate. I mean, I was happy that we didn't have to raise bail for you, because it just seemed so unacceptable to have you in prison. Yeah. But again, everyone regresses back. They say, oh, the mistake that you made wasn't possession, because you can possess some measly amounts of grams, right. But you can't possess over a certain amount, and then over and above that, you sold to a 17-year-old. And my understanding is she herself, can you describe that? Why she?
As far as I know, she was on probation herself, so when she was caught,
she was intimidated.
There was a lot more pressure, very intimidated, you know, with the thought herself of going to jail.
Right.
You know, so it's, you know, it's, I don't blame her.
Joe, can you say why not to give people up, what the experience is? If you give people up for the rest of your life, you're a snitch?
Well, what I've seen in the past is people who rat out their friends. The police tend to keep busting them, so if you want to keep getting busted, every time they want information, if they know you're a rat, they'll bust you again. So besides, you lose all your friends.
Yeah. So she wouldn't want to rat out a wheelchair person who clearly needs his medicine, and yet she did.
The courts have a way of, the courts and the police have a way of scaring people, you know, into giving people up.
You're a 17-year-old girl, and you got 7 cops around you in SWAT outfits. You're going to be very intimidated.
There were 7 cops around
At least. I mean, the whole of U.R.G.E.N.T pulled her over and surrounded her.
And that came right after she purchased marijuana at your house?
Yeah, she stopped in, and she'd had a bad day at school and had a headache and just wanted to go home and relax. And
right, right. So do you think that a lot of the strategy that's going on with the medical marijuana is to try to keep the monopoly going and to keep people in prison? Because regular dealers who just plain are good at making good oil, they're not protected at all.
Right.
The decriminalization doesn't affect them at all.
Right, which is kind of hard, because in the decriminalization they made marijuana harmless. So I don't understand how something that's harmless at less than 25 grams can become harmful at 5 ounces.
I think we understand very clearly. I think it's monopoly.
You know, it's definitely monopoly, and
it's market share.
It's a political money scheme.
Right. But now
it's generated by fear, and that's wrong. You know, I mean, people need to get beyond your fear and step out there and start correcting these problems.
But you're kind of developing a certain amount of fearlessness right now because you've been successful, you know, and
the fearlessness isn't from success. It's from having my ass hanging over the back end of a cliff and no choices.
Describe that.
I haven't, you know, I have a body that has a condition of
give the wide shot so we see his body.
Spasticity and of extreme neuropathic pain, and you know, I would have anybody sit inside my skin for 5 minutes and have a choice of a joint in front of them, and have the knowledge that I do what it does, and not take that joint and say, no, I'm going to be a legal, no, bullshit.
So what you're saying is that the fear is so strong. The fear of the pain is so strong.
Well,
it's stronger than the fear of the judge. It's stronger than the fear of prison, because I saw somebody given 15 years. And if it was marijuana that he was selling, this black guy who really knew the law well, except he didn't understand the medical benefit, and he didn't understand how to argue the way Joe was arguing on constitutionality. I don't think he got 15 years because he was black, and Joe and his son essentially got no probation, no P testing, no jail time because they were white. I think it took something more than just Joe and his son being white and this guy being black. But if Joe's case prevails, or if your case prevails, if when you come back on the 24th, if you can come up with a compelling program, it could start to change things.
Right.
And the pain that you're going through now, I think, with the oil, you could get out of the wheelchair, but you don't have money for it. And dealers who have the oil are very afraid to deal with patients like you because they're afraid that such patients are in a vulnerable, fragile condition. And when 7 SWAT team people from Urgent say, give up your source, they're going to be the first to give it up because they're so debilitated. Do you think that logic is correct? That
well, the other thing is the oil is a very difficult process to make, and it's very expensive. And there's not a market out there for recreational use for the oil. It's a medicinal oil.
What's your comment on that, Joe, about the oil?
Well,
it's not that hard to make, really, is it?
No, the oil is actually very simple to make, and anybody could make it at home. And all they need, basically, is a rice cooker and grain alcohol, and soak the marijuana in the grain alcohol, and then strain it through a coffee filter, and then boil off the alcohol until you're left with just the oil. It's a very simple process. Now, that oil has been proven to cure cancer, but unfortunately, possession of that oil in New York State and in most states is a serious felony. It's much more serious than marijuana. So it makes it very hard for people who are supplying it to take the risk. Anybody, if you want to cure somebody of cancer, you're risking going to jail for 10 years, which quite a few people are doing. I myself did it, and it's scary. You know, everybody needs to start writing the politicians and the governor and everybody and demand that the laws change, that they repeal the archaic marijuana laws, prohibition, and make available to sick people and people with cancer, people with diabetes. It's amazing the amount of different diseases that the pure THC oil actually cures. If you doubt what I'm saying, go to Run from the Cure, Rick Simpson. And what's the other one?
Well, Run from the Cure full version, you can see the whole thing on YouTube, the story. The other one is what?
The one with the kid that did 100 people and the test?
Okay, that is, if you Google in vitamin cannabis, you can see a group of people in Denver that really excited me because they got 100 people together, and this actually jumps into the point about that it's been proven. People will say, oh, it hasn't been proven, it hasn't been proven. The reason it hasn't been proven on the level of those snobs is because no scientist, no doctor, no researcher can run official stories because it's on Schedule I. It simply can't be done. But that's why the studies haven't been done. It's not because Rick Simpson's a flake. I would say that it's been proven anecdotally, time after time after time, when people have access to good oil and when people take enough of the oil. So if you look at vitamin cannabis, it's parts 1 and 2 that's up. I think it's Captain Cannabis. It's a guy who reminds me a little bit of Rob Robertson. You know, we saw him at Denver. He's saying, you know, this is the cure for cancer. He's an activist. But he was able to get together 100 people, and one man in particular, his uncle, had cancer, and it was looked at, and they couldn't actually find the cancer. It was just the tests were saying it was in his body, and they were going to wait for it to develop somewhere and then radiate it and give it chemotherapy. So his uncle was an open-minded guy, 60 years old. He looked at Run from the Cure, and he decided to go for it. And because his nephew was growing it in the ghettos in Denver, indoors, he had access to the plant. He made him some oil, and there was 10 days where he was on 2.5 grams a day, which is a huge amount. He was comatose. He was watched over by his friends. But he was cancer-free at the end of it. So cannabis in any amounts has never harmed anybody. And so that means when you do go through these sort of scary phases of facing a life-threatening disease, you can be fortified by knowing this has never hurt anyone. And you described, Burt, yourself, that the pharmaceuticals that you were on was harming you.
Yeah. Yeah, they were extremely painful. And my body felt dead. It just wasn't alive. You know.
But weren't they to kill pain, the pharmaceuticals? Or were they
It was to reduce the tone and the spasticity.
Oh.
I was on 3,200 milligrams of Neurontin that was supposed to do something with the pain. But that.
So they gave you something for spasticity that could increase pain. Is that it? And then they gave you stuff for pain?
It ended up increasing the pain because of the withdrawals.
And the withdrawals means an hour or so after you took the pharmaceutical?
Before the pills were due, before my dose was due, about an hour before, the withdrawals would kick in and the pain would be worse.
So you have a huge amount of personal experience working with the pharmaceuticals, watching your pain, and then your meditation practice, right?
Yeah.
So you pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah, I listen and, you know, try to...
You would be such an obvious dealer for people who are having these problems. I would imagine they would want to go to you, because along with getting their medicine, they could get all this advice, first-hand advice. So I could see why you wouldn't be too much liked by U.R.G.E.N.T.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, to put you in front of a jury, it seems, what jury would possibly sentence you? And yet that case could change the law.
Right.
If you didn't plea bargain, and if you went all the way for the jury. That's exciting. And your whole process could be a type of spiritual practice, even the pain, a kind of a biofeedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. You know, hindsight's 20/20, as they say.
Oh, but there's so much before you.
Yeah.
I mean.
So, you know, I mean, it's looking forward. I have a court case right now. I was violated probation on a possession charge, which I need to fight in court. So I get a medical marijuana defense on that and show just cause for using, and hopefully I can get that case thrown out.
What do you think, Joe? If he had possession, can he get a jury since he pleaded on something before, or not?
Well, on the violation, he could ask for a jury trial, and
Yeah.
they're not going to want to go with the jury trial. They're going to try to offer you a better deal. But if you stick to it and go with the jury trial, and you could get acquitted by the jury, and then there's nothing they can do to you.
Now,
you know?
if he's acquitted by the jury, you were saying a right for one is a right for all. Wouldn't that open up the pathway for non-wheelchair people also, if he's acquitted or not?
I'm not sure on that, but I know that according to the Constitution, once one citizen has a right, we all have that right. So it seems logical that if the jury acquitted him, and then the prosecutor would probably appeal it to the higher court, and if the higher court upholds what the jury said, that opens a whole new can of worms.
Worms or paradigm shift?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully paradigm shift.
Yeah. Because wouldn't the best outcome be for you to choose the finest strains? You do research and you find maybe, you know, a fire engine or train wreck or whatever they're called. I mean, the one that won the award was called God's Pussy. So they have all kinds of names.
God's Pussy is the one with the highest in CBDs, which is one of the best for pain.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because that's something, you know, I mean, in my experience, you buy, you know, when I was desperate, I'd get a 20 bag off somebody on the street, and I would smoke it, and it would create more.
Really?
And so, you know, I mean, it's like,
so
you would find something that would work, and then you'd go back to try to get it again, it'd be all gone, and you'd have to try another strain, you know. And
that's
so
exactly what Rick Simpson said. Rick Simpson said he smoked a joint once, and it was something he wished he could have gotten more of, that he felt it could have more addressed. It's the only time his pain totally went away was with this strain. And for that reason, he said we should have pharmaceutical grade It should be, but it should be, how would you say the word? It should be not regulated. It should be controlled and tabulated, and but the free market should do it.
Right. A lot of your dispensaries in California do gas test on the pot so that you know the THC, you know the cannabinoid composition of it. And so if you're dealing with a lot of pain, chronic pain, you know you can take one that's got higher ratio of CBDs to THC and higher on the THC. So as a consumer, you're more educated into your buying.
Now, as a consumer and as a patient, do you have certain strains in mind that if you really had your God-given inalienable constitutional rights kicked in, that you would grow?
I would probably grow a very heavy indica strain, something that's very going to produce a lot of body high and really like take the tone and the spasms and the pain away from the body.
So you think the indica, by laying you low, would take the spasms away?
Yeah.
But now, as a spiritual seeker, what about the more psychedelic aspects of the sativas that maybe you could work out issues?
I don't know. I find that spirit works irregardless of my medicines.
Right.
So.
But you're already off of painkillers, pharmaceutical painkillers. My feeling is that indica would work really well when people are really on heavy painkillers, particularly methadone. They're now giving methadone to cancer patients.
It's amazing. You know, and another thing that they've shown are people that are already on morphine or opiates is that marijuana increases the effects by 80%. So that if you were taking, say, 10 milligrams of an opiate and you started smoking marijuana, you would only have to take 2 milligrams of that opiate. And so it would be less dangerous to your body because it's being helped along by the marijuana.
Right.
So
I get the feeling, though, that I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just from what people are writing in and how I'm studying, that the opiates, and you said on a pain scale, only hit up to 3, whereas the marijuana hits to 6.5, along with acupressure goes to 6.5. So it seems there's some actual repair mechanism going on. Like in the case of acupressure, you would imagine that meridians would be kicked in, and you're actually repairing at least the electrical body that the physical body follows, whereas that the opiates sort of mask the pain, but that things are still
they just dull it over. They don't change anything. They just dull it.
But you feel that the marijuana is changing things.
Yeah, it's you know, bringing about change in my body. I get more return, more movement, more that. So it's, you know, I don't see it retrograding my body. I'm not. There's a lot of people later in years. Like your feet can just lock up, and I'm trying to think of the contracture. Your body can go into contracture where my foot wouldn't be able to bend its normal range of motion, but it would be basically frozen in a position, and that's called contracture. In my 11 years, I don't have any contracture.
Really?
No. You know, so that
but you're young.
Times when I was worried, well, I've been paralyzed 12 years, and usually within about 4 or 5 years, your foot or something starts contracting and becomes to a point where you cannot release it again.
So what you're saying is even only smoking the marijuana has kept liveliness in your body.
Yeah.
And you feel that there's that potential there to have even more movement.
Right.
And it would also make sense if Rick Simpson says when you smoke the medicine, 90% of it goes up in flame. So that must really excite you about the potential of oil if you can get a hold of the oil.
Yeah, I mean, very interested. I've always been interested in what the oil could do for me.
Right. And the only thing that's prevented you is access to it.
Yeah.
And now regulation, would you feel, you said you got one bit of marijuana on the street that made you feel worse, that you would want the ability to not have it regulated? I mean, what if the government said everybody gets this shitty brand that you got on the street?
That's, I mean,
that's unacceptable, isn't it?
No,
You'd still be on the black market.
Yeah, because I need a strain that's going to work. You know,
So can you emphasize, Joe, the importance of dealers being free so people like Burt can get really what they need, not just some compromise?
Well, I think right now the dealers that are supplying are saints. You know, dealers that are supplying this oil to medical marijuana patients shouldn't be jailed. They should be patted on the back. You know, there's a lot of people in pain, and somebody's got to supply it. And the dealers that are willing to take that risk, my hat's off to them.
Right, right. Now I want to get into a delicate topic here. You feel the judge's hands are tied, that he can't do anything other than what he did. Joe feels differently. I want to just say, as a middle ground, we really came up feeling that this was the type of judge who would demand bail. And didn't you feel that, seeing how he behaved to everyone else?
Yeah, I expected to get carted away, very much so.
Right, you would have been in those orange suits with the handcuffs and the things on the feet. It's just so demeaning.
Inhumane.
Inhumane, yeah.
Inhumane.
Especially when...
It's really unbelievable that this is all because of a medicine.
Yeah, well, it's mostly about monopoly, and what frustrates me is I know great economists. I know Henry Georges, I know binary economists, and they don't want to be associated with the marijuana issue because that's how strong the stigma is. And I'm saying this is the issue. If you have economic solutions that says there's something better than taxation, that most of our assets and wealth comes not from our labor but through capital ownership, what better way to address getting excitement from the people to study boring economics than looking at this topic? You know, you're not having access to what could cure you,
right,
because it's not on the insurance. And it looks as though the marijuana groups, although I know you want the high ground as a meditator, and I too want to explore what the high ground means, because I don't want people calling in and just saying, oh, ain't it terrible? Mm-hmm. They're doing this and they're doing that, whoever they is. I think as meditators, we want to find the they within us.
Right.
What are we doing within us to block this from happening?
Yeah.
But at the
stop looking around at what other people are doing and look to yourself and what am I doing and how can I...
But one of your members from your Buddhist community showed up at court, which I think is a great thing. Whenever anybody shows up at court, that's a huge, important thing. But he was saying, when I was talking about Jesus and the healings, he said, oh, you don't want to get hung up on healing. And I said, well, you know, in a certain way, I know where you're coming from, being a meditator. You're saying everything is perfect. And you know that too, Joe, right, from the psychedelic experience?
Well,
everything's perfect.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
You know, he said you don't want to get hung up on healing. What greater service could you give to humanity than to heal somebody? You know, I think that he was way off on that. I think, you know, Jesus healed, and even in the Buddhist communities, one of the most important things is compassion. Well, right. What does compassion mean? If you're compassionate, you should be trying to heal people.
Right.
You know, you should be aware of other people's pain and try to alleviate it. So I totally disagree with what he was saying. I personally think that a lot of people are very weak and they don't want to take a stand, and if it's too controversial, they find some kind of reason to sidestep. And we're in an age where we can't sidestep anymore. There's too much pain in the world. There's too many people suffering. Our jails are full of nonviolent people. It's time for people to wake up to compassion within them and start doing something to alleviate the pain of both the medical patients and all those people suffering in jail.
Right. And also, I remember at the end of your sentencing, so-called sentencing with U.R.G.E.N.T, Joe was saying that if U.R.G.E.N.T is finding the hippies or the white group kind of tight and they're not ratting out people and giving people up, they're going to go for low-hanging fruit. They're going to go into the ghettos. They're going to find people who don't know their rights. Isn't that what you said? Yeah,
that's exactly it. You know, a lot of the marijuana activists, when we go to court, much more about law. than a lot of unfortunate kids in the ghetto that are getting busted. And because we know the law, we tend to get maybe lighter sentences. But so that makes it where the police, rather than bust us, because it's hard to convict us, they're taking it out on the kids in the ghettos, you know, and it's the poor blacks in this country. Our jails are 80% of the jails are filled with black people, you know. That's outrageous.
Right.
People should be doing something. People should be speaking up. As long as the people allow the politicians to do what they're doing, the police and the courts, their hands are tied. It's time for the people to really come down. This is an election year, and we're probably going to elect the same scoundrels that have been there before. It's time for people to start calling. Don't stop calling. Don't stop emailing the governor, the legislature, and demand change. Call every day. Email every day. Say, what are you doing? We want people out of jail. We want them to stop putting people in jail for nonviolent offenses. You know, violent people belong in jail. Nonviolent people, I don't care what drug they're selling, they don't belong in jail. People who are addicted need doctors, not prison.
If they're addicted.
Right.
So, Burt, you were talking about compassion also. Can you, that was in another show. Can you refresh our memory again?
Well, I'm trying to bring up the point.
People being courageous and standing up for the sake of compassion, that it's compassionate to stand up.
Yeah, it's, you had mentioned some of the Sangha members coming to support me. You know, that for me was...
Standing up.
Standing up, and a huge support for me.
Right.
Because in dealing with this and all the connotations and the demonization of marijuana and the struggle and being a criminal in the eyes of the society, you know, all of these things dragging on my psyche, you know, to have, you know, my fellow spiritual brethren show up and support me on that, you know, meant a huge.
Does that Buddhist community, are they enlightened about what marijuana really is? I mean...
Well, it was interesting because when I first started talking around, I asked what was Chogyam Trungpa's position on marijuana. And his position is that it reduces the suffering of samsara, samsara being this world, and the suffering is something that we all are part of.
Right.
And so what, in a way, it doesn't make us revile samsara as much as we should. So it's not the best thing to reduce the suffering. But, you know, I'm thinking, you know, he's talking in terms of your normal average person, but with somebody with extreme suffering.
I see what you're saying, but there's only so much a system can take when there's so much grief, so much bitterness, so much sorrow. So if the marijuana...
Well, that's why we're supposed to turn to meditation. And
but meditation, you can see, can also be a cop-out, where people say, oh, I can't do it. I mean, David and I explored this more when I said, okay, I know your argument, everything's perfect, don't get hung up on the healings, but just have these, you know, groovy meditations. But it seems there comes a time where a groovy meditation is not enough. You're so convinced of the goodness and the divinity that you know it can come out onto your body and onto the bodies of others and onto the body of the whole society, that the whole society doesn't have to have dumpy ghettos and people having to be prostitutes because they don't have any other way to make money. And, you know,
we can accept the way things are, but we can continue to make change in how things are.
Right.
You know, and so that's something that I try to do is, you know, accept what's around me, but where I see change necessary, make that change and try to make that change.
Joe made the change with the judge, being very aggressive to the judge, even going to the point of calling him a traitor, that treason is the only crime listed in the Constitution. And so many people that looked at the paperwork thought, oh my God, you're going to make the judge really angry. But it seems, can you describe your logic of making powerful people angry?
Well, no, I wasn't trying to make them angry. I was pointing out the law to them. You know, judges are supposed to, they swear an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. In protecting and defending the Constitution, it means that they are obligated to protect the rights of those people put in front of them. Even if the person's on trial, a judge should protect that person's rights.
Due process and equal protection.
Right, due process and equal protection. Now, in our case, we were saying, which is what we truly believe, that it is our religious belief, using the use of marijuana for both the healing of man and the healing of nations. Now, it's up to the judge to protect our constitutional rights, not protect the status quo. And what I was saying is...
Or special interests.
Right. Well, what I was saying to the judge is, if the legislature made a law that's illegal, it's not his job to enforce that law. It's his job to protect the people from that law. The Constitution was there to protect the people from government.
So if he protects them from that law, couldn't that throw the law out? Isn't that a way of making change, that a judge can make a change?
Well, if the judge ruled that way, then it's up to the prosecutor to appeal it. And then it goes to the next higher court. And eventually, hopefully, it gets up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court does the right thing. But unfortunately, in the country we're living in right now, the Supreme Court, most judges are political appointees, and they all protect the status quo. And what we have is, from judges from the lowest level all the way up to the Supreme Court, they're all committing treason when they don't protect the rights of the people, and they protect government over the people. Our Constitution was made, and the Bill of Rights was made to protect the people from government, not the opposite. And unfortunately, that's what we have today. All the courts protect government interests. Like if you try to say to a judge, the legislature's wrong, the judge right away will start arguing that the legislature made the law, and therefore, if the legislature did it, it's legal. And you find very few judges that are willing to say, no, the legislature didn't have authority to do this under the Constitution, which makes the judges not acting in accordance with their oath. Their oath is to protect the people, protect and defend the Constitution, not protect and defend the legislature or government.
Do you think, Burt, that the judge, having formed U.R.G.E.N.T, having helped to fund U.R.G.E.N.T, could have a conflict of interest and not be an impartial judge? But that your case scares him? Because
coming with his history and his background, he has a mindset of a prosecutor. You know, I mean, it's not something you're going to change overnight, going from being a prosecutor to a judge. In my case, I think Joe, you know, really putting a lot of information out there about medical marijuana and the benefits made him look at my situation a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all make headway for each other.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I'm saying I'd like to see more involvement with the black community on this. And I'm so happy when I hear voices calling in from, say, Harlem, and I've heard I've got a Jamaican following now, too, because they know what's really going on with marijuana, and they've had to live in this enslaved situation for so long. I think it's taken white people a while to sort of wake up and see how bad it is. Because you've got...
Well, we're the ones that demonized it. From the Mexicans and the blacks.
Right.
You know, so we're the ones that should turn around and make amends.
Right.
I mean, I really feel that we should legalize it and apologize.
Make amends other than doing chemotherapy and radiation, because we're all suffering from the ignorance.
Well, I'm against you keep using the word legalize.
Repeal
the bad law. Legalize just means that the government gets to regulate it again. They're legalized. They'll say, okay, it's legal, and you got to do it this way or this way, and they're going to make more rules, and the rules always wind up putting people in jail. You know, before 1937, marijuana was free. Any farmer could grow it. Anybody could grow it. If you were growing it for medical, you could grow it and make your own medicine. Now, the way they have it, even if they say legalize it, what they're going to do is say, okay, we're going to legalize it, and we're going to allow one of these big drug companies to supply it. And that still means the person who's growing it at home is still going to be at risk of going to jail. You know, we want repeal of a bad law. The law was unconstitutional, should have never been made. We want it repealed. Legalization is a scam word. You know, I don't want it legalized. I want the law repealed. Leave people free to do whatever they want to do with it.
Did you know there were about 3,000 doctors who tried to protest when they found out that in 1937 they wanted to make cannabis illegal by changing the name to marijuana? They for a while, because they thought it was something else. They didn't know what they were talking about, that some Mexicans were smoking. And then, much to their horror, the doctors realized it was in the pharmacopoeia, and it was the basis of so many different medicines. Now, these men tried to be heroic up to a point. They constantly started getting arrested and fined, and then they were told that the pharmaceutical companies were going to come up with other alternatives, so they just acquiesced. A lot of times people complain about doctors, but it seems everybody feels it's too big to handle, and they all point to someone else to do it. And you were saying, let's not complain about the marijuana policy project or NORML or whatever. Let's just take the responsibility ourselves. But we still need a group. You know, it's hard for just one person to stand up. I know every person...
I've tried to stand up with groups behind me, and they don't allow it. You know, I mean, it's like...
I see what you're saying.
You know, I mean...
You mean
they hindered me more than there was any...
Can you give me an exact example, and I'll tell you my experience?
I don't know. To me, anytime, say, for instance, if I never took any money from MPP because I didn't want to be marijuana policy project, because I didn't want to be beholden to them. You know, because everything that I did was for my own benefit. For
did
the benefit
they offer
of other
you
people.
Money?
Yeah, for hotels or travel. But, you know.
So you paid it yourself when they offered you?
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Because I am not. This is not. I am not doing this for somebody else.
Why, when you need
I'm
oil?
not doing it for a
Burt,
group.
Burt,
but
listen.
I'm doing it for.
Burt, I understand what you're saying. I know this is a little painful, and lots of my viewers, I want them to hear this too. Harold Channer uses this expression: "We don't know where we're going, but we're on our way." If you give money to a group out of the goodness of your heart, you get a certain amount of good karma from that. You know, you were sacrificing, you paid for your own hotel and things like that. But if in truth that group is controlled by a monopolist's interest and its purpose is to run it off into a ditch, I think there comes the time in true healing where you have to face this. This is what happened to me with my spiritual practice. I ran into a master in the south of India that said, if you want to do the kinds of things you're talking about, you need angel power, you need God power, and you need power objects. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I figured I better inform myself a little bit before I dismiss it. I'm pretty convinced today that one of those power objects was marijuana, that it's actually a tool, it's a divine weapon in this sort of struggle to unite our souls to this veil of, you know, valleys of sorrow that we see. So if you need oil yourself right now and you don't have money to get oil, and you've given money to a group who, when you need their help, they say, thanks for the phone call, you're in trouble, we'll take you off the website. That's a pretty heartbreaking realization. But I think exploring that heartbreak is where you're going to get more juice for your healing. You see what I mean? I think people should stand up for what they require and what they need. And right now, I've heard people say, oh, his problem was he was caught selling to a minor. Whenever you hear selling to anybody, there's this image of wads of cash somewhere, and this guy's hiding behind his wheelchair, but he's really taking all the money. You see what I mean?
It's not the situation.
I know, but that's the type of prejudice that we're dealing with. And Urgent will say, well, you know, here's a guy that's going to be the next natural dealer. Like I say, you're a natural. You've had years of experience with pharmaceuticals. If you're given freedom to plant a plant in your backyard, by golly, you're going to find the best strains.
Right.
People are going to inform you, just like when you were in the nursing home. You weren't told that marijuana works by the people in the white coats with the stethoscopes. You were told by other spinal cord injury people, right?
Yeah.
So by the same token, that's why we have to do it. And by the way, can you put up having problems calling Paula, Gloria, and my email? Because I want to emphasize again, it's very frustrating to me, even more than to you, that I'm not easily getting your calls. And I keep having to tell you to turn down your television set. And then you tell me when you turn down your television. Can you put that CG up? Having problems calling into Paula, Gloria, and then put my email on the bottom. Just hit that on the character generator. And anyway, it's not up yet. Email me, rabbitholecentral, yeah, there it is, at earthlink.net. And also email Dan at mnn.org, because Dan is the executive director. And I really want to make sure that, you know, community TV is all about community. And in order to have a good, strong community, as Burt says, we need to communicate. You were saying that to Joe Friendly. Mm-hmm. If you have a problem with how I did something, let's talk about it. I'm having a problem right now getting your calls, and I need some data from you. What happens when you try to call in? When you mute your television, can you not hear me on the telephone? Because if that's the case, then I need to know about it from you, not from me guessing that I'm telling them, my viewers are smart enough to turn down the television set. If they're saying they're not hearing me, I think they're not hearing me unless they can hear me through the television, because they can't hear me through the telephone. So again, put that email up, rabbitholecentral at earthlink.net, and Dan at mnn.org. Please tell me if you're having any problems calling in, because for this to happen, as you see, the marijuana activist groups, just like what Burt says, let's not count on anybody but ourselves. But I need more than just me. I need the viewers to give feedback and to know and to track where you're at on this. I know we had one of our first calls with somebody who also had a lot of pain. Okay. But I could see you wanted to get away from being a victim. You wanted, you know, what I call the high ground of a meditator, to get into that expanded place. Yeah. That's what I wanted.
Well, it's sort of, I mean, it's been my ability to deal with injury is to look for the higher ground, to try to, you know, whenever difficulty hits, is try to look for what is the gem of transformation that will come out of this problem.
Right.
Or how can I turn this to help?
Yeah.
Rather than...
I'm saying I think you can help the Marijuana Policy Project. I think you can help NORML by pointing out these things, to say, hey, you guys, I feel really let down. When I went to court, you didn't provide an expert witness. You didn't provide me any help. Isn't that what you said, Joe, that for 40 years NORML has been collecting money? What are they doing with the money?
Right. Well, I have a real problem with NORML. For 40 years they've been collecting money, and any time that anybody I've known has called NORML to try to ask them for help, with all the money they've raised, they've never put up any money to help people with lawyers, to help people with expert witnesses. All they'll ever do is recommend a lawyer to you who's going to make money off you. So in my opinion, I think people should not send money to NORML. People should become active themselves. You know, don't leave it to NORML to change the law, because they won't change the law. Change the law yourself. Become active. Call your politicians, call your representatives, write the governor, email them. Just don't stop. Every day do it. You know, until we get change, the people should just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. We, the people, are the sovereigns in America. Politicians work for us. If we don't tell the politicians what we want, then they're going to dictate to us. And we don't need dictators, we need freedom.
Does your spiritual practice make you feel a sovereign in the moment? So that you're not afraid of politicians and you can stand up? Even though you're in a wheelchair, you can stand up?
Yeah, I mean, I feel as a sovereign citizen, I mean, I don't know if it goes back to my father or, you know, my upbringing, but I've always felt like, you know, we have the right, as long as it doesn't impinge upon other people, to do what we want to do. You know, I mean, we have that unalienable right. And in my situation, here was something that, if I had marijuana, was basically a crime against myself, and so I took it. And it became later that I had, you know, to sell it to keep getting it, because it wasn't permitted for me.
But what's the matter with selling it? Because you would be a natural expert.
Well, there is no problem with selling
know,
it. It's like I would not have a problem, you know, having. I mean, that would be that's a dream of mine, is to have a dispensary where people could come in and I could provide for them.
Right.
Those people would come in and they would present their ID cards.
Right.
You know, it's perfectly the way it should be.
Do you think that when you go before Judge Donald A. Williams on January 24th, he said, come up with a program for me. Could you come up with a program of what you would like to do and what the cost would be? And just say, I don't have this money, and if I go to California and I sign up for, I'm only guessing that there would be a place in California that would be happy to give you as much oil as you need and track the results. But that money is now going out of New York, when New York is already... Why did you say, Joe, the action is here in New York and not in California?
Well, I say that because already California has sold out their own rights with this proposition that they've made. They've now said that where the law should have been repealed, the people have now given the politicians permission to regulate it. Where had they just pushed to repeal the law out in California, marijuana would be free for medical people or for anyone who wants it. But now what they've done is they've given the politicians permission to regulate it, where before the politicians were acting illegally. Now they've given them they've made them legal to regulate it. But in New York, the politicians have already said in their own paperwork, marijuana does no harm. Therefore, if it does no harm, the law should be repealed. And the law is unconstitutional. How can you put people in jail for a substance that the politicians admit does no harm? So I think the real stand is going to be here in New York, where we're going to try to legalize, not legalize it, I shouldn't use that word, where we're going to try to repeal the bad law. And once we repeal the bad law, then it's up to the people, up to each individual, whether they want to grow it, or for medical reasons, for religious reasons, or just for fun. Marijuana, besides being spiritual and being a healer, is also very enjoyable. So I think New York is probably going to be the state that actually repeals the marijuana law.
That's exciting. Now, you said, Burt, that you don't get high because the pain is so great that the effect of the marijuana is absorbed by getting you out of pain. Do you look forward to having an experience of being high, just like in meditation high? Or do you think that there's something shameful about that?
I don't think there's anything shameful.
Well, I mean, I was just referring to your Christian background.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hair shirts and all that?
It's just something that's very elusive for me. You know, I mean, I find that to get out of the pain state and into painless state is high enough.
Okay, what about bardos? Let's talk about bardos, what that means.
Transitions from one state to another.
And usually they're painful, aren't they?
Very painful. Change doesn't come usually without pain.
Right.
You know, and it's something that we can choose to either learn from it or we can choose to ignore it and then have it happen to us again until we learn.
Can you talk about bardos, Joe, how you know of them?
I'd rather not.
Okay, my excitement about the discussion is that what looks to be bad can, with a higher perspective, transform in a twinkling. And could that not happen here?
Exactly. And I believe it is happening. I mean, that's something that is my faith.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Okay, that's good.
We're done.
We're done.
Thank God.
No, hang on. Let me just wrap it up for YouTube. Can you put the wide shot? Okay, and then put that having problems calling to Paula, Gloria. And I just want to emphasize again, if you're having any problems calling in to me, rabbitholecentral@business.net or dan@mnn.org. This is Paula, Gloria, over and out.
No,
Bye.
I'm on television. Gotta go. Bye.
That's it. Thank you very much, really, all of you, and also YouTube viewers, too, and particularly people in other states. And I hope to connect up with a great crowd in Denver, what they're doing. Thank you. Thank you, Burt.
Thank you, Paula.
Great. And Josh, do you want to do a show?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to be doing one.
Josh is going to do one with you.
I gotta move.
Okay.
Okay, he needs a break for a few minutes.
Okay.
Give everyone a break.
Yeah, because we could put
Give me a
Carol.
break too.
Yeah, give you a break. You did great. Great.
That was a great show.
Yeah.
You liked the camera?
Yeah, I love the camera.
You saw it?
Yeah. 'Cause I
Yeah.
traced it in the monitors.
What sort of exercises do you do?
I'm trying to get a standing frame so that I can actually stand up, and then when I'm standing, I can like go up on my toes.
You can walk a bit.
A little bit.
Very hard.
It's very, you know, I don't have my old PT. I had a physical food. It was really amazing.
Those were great shows.
Not do it. I wish someone else would.
You made this whole thing happen.
Yeah. You know where the restroom is.
Yeah. No, it's just, I gotta move.
Everything is public.
All right.
Everything is accessible, fully accessible.
All right, Joe.
First of all, this whole place is in public domain. Except it's a lot of work.
Oh, really?
It's not, I hate the word free because it's not free. Not, I mean,
You're on the upstroke.
having to eat about 20 hours a day, that's not free.
It's really good. You're doing it? Oh, boy. All right.
I hope. I mean,
Let the
I'm not-
record show he's jiggling his coins while we're talking about it.
You got to come to our wedding too.
Oh, I am.
December 22nd.
I think it's going to be December 22nd. I have to make sure the church is.
Oh,
Will you come, Bert?
I'm gonna bring some
I want
nice
Rick Simpson to call in.
gift that makes a big difference. I mean,
Wonderful.
A big bud.
no. I'll make a gift that makes a difference.
Pretty hot, brother.
Okay.
20, what is that date?
All right.
She's trying to hook it up.
Wood. Oh, my
No,
God.
no, we're going to do it.
Yeah, I worry when I read it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing is getting active medical marijuana users out there to advocate.
Oh, Joe?
We're in so much pain.
Yeah.
What?
No, Joe Barton. Do you want to be with Harold?
Huh? No.
Harold?
No.
No.
Let just Burt do
Okay.
it with Harold.
Okay, Bert, you're only going to be
You
with
have to
Harold.
get this thing up the stairs, or they'll figure it out.
Why do you have to?
That machine out yet?
Why do you have to get him up?
Up west stairs.
No, I mean,
No, they got an elevator here for,
Oh, no, Harold's in it.
oh.
And then Josh.
and then Josh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh, wow.
The more shows you can do, because they'll run on different dates, and you know.
yeah. Your name's up there.
So with Harold, you have to be very polite. You say, excuse the fuck out of me, but would you shut the fuck up, please?
It's good to have you on all these shows, just in case the judge screws you around and locks you up. At least enough people have seen you that when we go on the air and say, "Free Burt," you know what I mean? People will know who you are.
Yeah.
You know, I hesitated to ask you the details of the selling it to a minor, but 17-year-old female, that's like a misuse of the term.
What do you mean?
A minor and all that crap. Like, it gets by with all the connotations of a 4-year-old when she said,
17. Yeah, she's like a month away from 18, and
big fucking deal.
it's like, I'm hurting. I had a bad day. It's that time of the month. I just want to go home.
And it ain't her first joint either.
Yeah, it's not. You know, it's like.
But who cares? Who cares whether she was having a bad day? Why shouldn't you be able to sell?
You know,
I think
I
you should
wanna
come
say
up
this,
with a
Harold
budget.
has resisted marijuana. We've tried to get him to choke up and stuff. He's afraid to go.
John Molina said he smoked
There's
marijuana.
gonna be some,
Yeah?
a lot of excitement on the 22nd.
Yeah, it's my birthday.
It could be so exciting, your beard
I
was
thought you
gonna
were too
turn
young to go
brown.
steady.
Your beard is gonna get brown again.
Oy.
That's how exciting it is.
There was a song when I went to high school, 2 years ago, steady.
This is so perfect because if we do Josh's show, we'll be finished when Harold comes. The set's all here.
Was Harold
Do
supposed
Harold.
to come?
Harold is going to interview him.
When?
4 o'clock.
Oh, here.
He has it from 4 until 6.
Oh, he's gonna get some
and we
work
could
out
wrap
of
up early.
Oh, I thought Josh can do it too? No.
Yeah, Josh is going
You
to
can do it
do a
quick
show.
half hour.
Quick
We
half hour.
can do a show now.
Yeah.
Ready?
We'll do hemp marijuana 101.
I can split, I hope.
Do you need to go to the bathroom?
No, it's just...
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're young.
Well, Harold is an easier show. He does monologues. He calls it conversation, but it's monologues.
He's going to really...
Ask him about transcending scarcity, and then he can go to
No,
sleep.
don't prejudice him. We're just like a family where we're picking on each other.
It's
you
like
know?
everything is in a certain sense, whatever that means.
Yeah.